Welcome to my weekly art vlog, episode 6. This episode falls in the category of art news. I've got some announcements to make. But first, on a personal note, a little medical update. Today, I am so pleased to announce that my finger in my left hand that I smashed in the door is much better. I had the 10 stitches removed yesterday. I tried last week to rest and heal because that's what it takes. You need to just slow down and rest, and I really needed my hand back quickly, so that's what I did. I couldn't clean. I couldn't get it wet, the doctor said, so that, plus it just hurt. I couldn't really use it. So it was very difficult to clean anything myself, the dishes, the house. But now that I'm getting my finger back, the stitches are out and it feels like a finger again, I am so grateful. That's what happens when you're without something and then you get it back. So anyway, the house is a mess, as you can imagine. The studio's a mess. The floor I haven't cleaned in a week. I am going to start cleaning tomorrow. After I finish this, I'm going to rest the rest of the day, just do some small things, and then dig in tomorrow. Then I polish up the place. Stay tuned because I've got some real news coming up. You know, I received a couple emails this week that are pretty exciting, and I want to share them with you. As you watch me paint the tractor and the landscape in episode 3, 4, and 5 of this video blog, I was always mentioning a deadline, a Friday deadline, you might remember. Well, I was very pleased that despite all my setbacks of no electricity and water for several days because of Hurricane Fiona and no phone because I got it wet for 3 weeks, no phone. And then I smashed my finger requiring stitches and ER visit and doctor's visits. I was still able to finish the paintings and meet the deadline of Friday, September 30th. What I didn't tell you is that deadline, I was entering those paintings, hopefully to get juried into the 14th annual Art About Agriculture exhibition. I was just glad to have them done and have them entered, and I breathed a sigh of relief just getting that accomplished. But yesterday I received an email on my iPhone that said, "Dear Jules, I'm happy to report that the jury for the 14th annual Art About Agriculture exhibit at the Santa Paula Art Museum selected your art for the exhibit." Yay! Went on to say that 143 artists entered over 300 pieces, and they selected 60 artists out of the 143 will exhibit 62 pieces that will fill up the exhibit area and be a powerful show. Well, that's my good news. And here's the painting. If you didn't watch episode 4, you can go back and look at that. I have the link below. That's where I blocked this in from the drawing stage. I've got the preliminary black and white drawing and the blocking in and about a week's worth of time-lapse painting in the beginning on this, so you can look at that if you'd like to. I hope that you can make it. It's going to be a great show. The premiere party will be on November 12th, probably from 4 to 6 as usual. And this year, there's no, we don't have to wear masks. And I've gone to a couple of these receptions and I don't know who is who, so I can't even say hello to people because it's like you can't tell who's who. So this will be the first time in a long time that we can see each other at one of these receptions. I just thank the Ag Alliance for considering my work. Thank the Santa Paula Art Museum for all what they do for the community. Art truly builds community. I'm going to give you some video shots of the paintings and close-ups of the South Mountain, the orange and avocado groves just west of town. My wonderful friend Julie White, whose mother Claire was an artist and also painted from this vantage point. Very inspired by her, and thankful to Julie White for inviting me to her home for a wonderful day with friends. And I was able to take these pictures, and I wish I was there painting it in person. One day I'll be back. I'll do that. But I hope you enjoy this, and I thank Julie for the opportunity to paint this, and I thank you all for tuning in. I've got some other art news that came in on my email on Thursday also that I want to share with you, so stay tuned for more news coming right up. I received another email earlier in the day Thursday before I got my great news from the Ag Art Alliance. This email was from the ArtNet News, and although the headline said Ferre smashed a Roman statue, the photo in the newsletter was the flaming June painting, which if you live in Puerto Rico, you see it everywhere. I mean, truthfully, I never knew. I didn't really understand why. I mean, I knew that the artist was not Puerto Rican. The heading under the flaming June painting talked about how the painting had disappeared for decades, many decades. So I was intrigued. Then another related article popped up that Flaming June and 4 other Victorian paintings were on their way to the Met in New York, while the Museo de Arte de Ponce repairs earthquake damage from January 2020. You may remember the earthquake that rocked Puerto Rico, resulting in at least 1 death and leaving the majority of the island without power, one of the many times. Amid the fallout from the quake, which measured 6.4 on the Richter scale, one of Puerto Rico's most important museums was closed, the Museo Arte de Ponce. The 5 Victorian masterpieces from the collection will be featured in an installation at the Met beginning today, actually, October 8th. The exceptional loans, including the iconic Flaming June by Frederic Leighton, John Everett Millis's The Escape of the Heretic, painted in 1559, and Edward Burne-Jones's Small Briar Rose series, 3 paintings, The Prince Enters the Wood, The King and His Court, and The Sleeping Beauty, all painted in 1871 to 73. The paintings will be displayed in the fabulous Met galleries for 19th and early 20th century European paintings and presented with a dialogue with other artists at the Met. You know what's the coolest thing is that it's going to bring together Leighton's Flaming June with another painting that he did called the Lacrymae, I don't know if I've got that pronounced right, in 1894-95. Those are 2 of his last monumental paintings. And although the works have been exhibited together, this is the first time they'll be displayed side by side. It's pretty cool. Since the Museo de Arte de Ponce has closed for repair 2020, the partnership allows the public to continue viewing these fabulous works, very important works. I think it's cool how the museums come together. You know, after tragedies, that's kind of what we do. I like to see that the art world is doing the same thing. It makes a great connection between New York's collection and the people at that museum and our museum here. I want to talk about the painting specifically, but first let's look at a few headlines about this collection that's on exhibit starting today in New York. The Rival Times picked up the Dia article, and the Nueva Dia says, in the article it says, these 5 works are the greatest examples of Victorian painting in the world. Few works rival the beauty of Leighton's Flaming June or the impressive artistic prowess of the paintings of Millis and Burne-Jones. The curator from Ponce, she said, we are excited to collaborate with the Met as part of our efforts to share prestigious works from the Museo de Arte de Ponce while our main galleries remain closed due to the repairs. Her name is Cheryl Hartup, director of the Ponce Museum of Art. She went on to say, which I was trying to tell you, these 5 important paintings are part of the cultural heritage of Puerto Rico. In fact, Flaming June is one of the most beloved works of art on the island and one of the most recognized and reproduced images in British art. She hopes that the public will take advantage of this great opportunity, this collaboration between the Met and the Ponce Museum. And I do too. If anybody out there is in New York or is traveling there, be sure to go see this. The selection of the pieces on loan was carried out with the aim of highlighting relationships between the works at the Met and the works at the museum, and bringing them together, which is a cool collaboration and collection. It's shown side by side. And then the small series of the Wild Rose, which includes 3 pieces from Ponce. Here's a picture of them in the Ponce Museum. They're going to join up with the love song that's in the Met. Yeah, they were commissioned by the same patron, by the way, William Graham. He had romantic tastes and profoundly shaped the artist's style because he commissioned him to do these works, which is interesting that they should say that. But to me, it's interesting that these three paintings are going to come together with their fourth one of the series, The Love Song, because it's fragile condition. It stays at the Met. It doesn't travel. And then Méliès's The Flight of the Heretic will have its counterpart for Ferdinand Lurid by Ariel, 1848-49, which is at the Met on a long-term loan, courtesy of a private collection. So those two early works by Méliès cannot be seen in any other museum outside of the UK. This is a great collaboration, bringing artist works together. You know, there are silver linings sometimes. You know, it's neat seeing how people are working together. I want to know more. I want to know more about the painting, and I want to know more about how it ended up in Puerto Rico. How they were once referred to as masterpieces, then fell out of style for a period. I mean, way out of style. And how Puerto Rico came to own them. I'd like to know more about the actual art piece. I mean, there's 5 paintings, but let's at least look at the Flaming June. Let's find out a little bit about Luis Ferre and his desire to create a museum in Ponce. How he acquired those paintings. He was born in 1904 in Ponce. My mother-in-law, Isabel, she was born in Ponce, 1915, a little bit younger. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science and a Master's degree from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. From a young age, he was a talented pianist, like my mother-in-law. He did advanced piano studies for 5 years at New England Conservatory of Music, Massachusetts. And in 1925, he began his career as an engineer at the Puerto Rico Iron Works, founded by his father in 1918. In 1935, his passion for the arts led him to found the Pro Arte de Ponce. And in 1937, he chaired the first public library of Ponce. Sounds like someone else I know, Douglas Shively. And in 1940, he became a candidate for the City Hall of Ponce. He belonged and led many civic organizations and charity, among them the Lions Club and the Rotary Club and the YMCA. And in 1945, he acquired the newspaper El Dia, founded in 1911 in Ponce. He was the president and the editor. Amazing guy. 1947, he has initiatives with the Bishop of Ponce, James E. McManus, for the foundation and construction of the Catholic University of PR. And in 1956, together with his wife, Lorencita Ramirez de Arellano, he created the Luis A. Ferre Foundation to promote the development of arts and education in Puerto Rico. 1956, it was a good year. I was born that year. Yeah, I'm that old. But one of his dreams was realized that year. It was the opening of the Ponce Museum of Art. First acquisitions for the museum included a religious painting by Jose Campeche, can you guess it? And the landscape by the famous Puerto Rican impressionist Francisco Oller. I've got to do a study on that. When I go to the other museum, we'll do an episode with that. In full swing of his career, he won the governorship of Puerto Rico during a 4-year period. He created the new Progressive Party, and 5 years later, and became the 8th president of the Senate of Puerto Rico, and he was previously a member of the House of Representatives. In 1991, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the President of the United States, the highest award granted by the U.S. government to civic leaders for their worthy contribution to culture. And from 1993 to 2002, he was a member of the Board of Directors of the Corporation of Musical Arts for Puerto Rico for the Symphony Orchestra, the Casals Festival, the Conservatory of Music Social Program of the Orchestra. Luis Alberto Ferre died 3 months shy of his 100th birthday. Still actively involved in acquisitions at the museum. So the museum project. It began in 1956 when Luis A. Ferre traveled to Europe and acquired various European art pieces, including many pre-Raphaelite works, which encouraged him to start a project for the museum in the city of Ponce, his birthplace. With the advice of 2 experts, Julius Held, specialist on Rubens, and professor of art history at Barnard College and Columbia University, and Renee Taylor, an art and architecture enthusiast and professor at the University of Granada, Yale, and Columbia. Ferre compiled a collection of works of art based on their value instead of their popularity. Ferre would state in a Forbes interview that the scholars and the critics called it all kitsch, which was thought as I was crazy to buy them. Kitsch is like an early 20th century borrowed German word that means tacky. As the story goes, on January 3rd, 1959, Ferre opened the museum at a house at 70 Cristina Street in Ponce, at what is today the Centro Culture de Ponce, with an exhibit of 72 works of art. Some of these original paintings continue to be on display today. As time passed and the museum gained popularity, additional works of art were added to the collection. In 1962, the Samuel H. Kress Foundation donated 15 paintings to the museum. By 1989, the museum's collection had grown to 500 pieces, with a then estimated value of $50 million, equivalent to $109 million in present-day terms. Fearing a fire in the Cristina Street building would destroy its collection, Ferre acquired a tract of land on Las Americas Avenue in Ponce to build the current museum, and recruited architect Edward Durrell Stone for its design. On the 23rd of April, 1964, the first stone was placed and the construction of the museum began. It was finished in 1965 and officially opened on the 28th of December, 1965. One of the main features of the museum is its hexagonal galleries, which allow natural light to enter through the corners, bringing in illumination to the exhibitions. The museum contained a total of 14 galleries, 2 gardens, and an amphitheater, and its main entrance with bifurcated ladders. Breaststrokes in Flight, a 26-foot-high aluminum structure, was installed in 1984 by New York sculptor Roy Lichtenstein on the front yard of the museum, which was then considered the largest public display artwork in Latin America and the Caribbean. The museum was closed from 2008 to 2010 while undergoing renovations, reopening in time for the celebration of its 50th anniversary on the 13th of November 2010, after a $30 million building improvement project. In the meantime, the museum held exhibits in the San Juan's Plaza Las Americas. Remember that? Yeah. And some of the best pieces were loaned out to traveling exhibitions at fine arts institutions around the world, like right now. Some of the artists whose paintings and works are exhibited at the museum are Peter Paul Rubens, Lucas Grenache, Bartolome Esteban Muriel, Eugene Delacroix, Sir Edward Burne-Jones, among others. The main masterpiece of the museum, of course, none other than the Flaming June, painted by Frederic Leighton. He bought this piece for less than $1,000 in Amsterdam. It was in an auction and it didn't meet its reserve, and he went to the gallery and bought it. It's his favorite. And also The Last Sleep of Arthur in Avalon, the final masterpiece and crowning achievement of Sir Edward Burne-Jones, is another one of the main pieces of the museum's collection, originally acquired by Ferre for just 1,600 British guineas in 1963. The enormous painting I've pictured here was started in 1881 and left unfinished at the artist's death in 1890. In 2009, both The Flaming June and The Last Sleep of Arthur in Avalon were loaned to the Tate Britain, while the museum underwent a 2-year refurbishment, as we discussed. Other paintings were loaned to the Museo del Prado in Madrid. Equally important is the Puerto Rican art collection, which ranges from the 18th century to the present day and includes great masterpieces such as Jose Campeche, Francisco Oller, and Miguel Poe, as well as best contemporary talents such as Mirna Baez, Francisco Rodin, Antonio Martorell, and Arnaldo Roche Rebel, among others. The museum also displays work by international artists. In March 2006, the museum exhibited the work of Mexican artist Frida Kahlo. Here's a picture of Louis Ferre in the middle. He's the founder of the museum, and he made a few impulsive acquisitions on occasion. But he also had two historical curator advisors, like I mentioned earlier. Professor Julius Held, the great Rubens scholar, and Dr. Renee Taylor, a younger British Spanish, was based in New York and taught at NYU and Brown College. He was Ferre's earliest advisor, and he's the one who gave him first the general guidelines of what to buy for his newly founded museum. Taylor, on the left, had landed a lecturer job at the University of Granada after working as a spy in World War II. From Spain, he moved to Ponce in 1961 to become the first curator of the museum and later the director. Held and Taylor had different interests and personalities, but they did agree on one thing: 19th century art. They joined forces to tease Ferre on when he bought art of the wrong sort. Ferre had hired Held and Taylor for their historical art experience, and it must have taken a great deal of courage to stand up and not be shamed into disliking paintings like the Flaming June. In 1970, Victorian art began to be taken seriously again by the academia, and later by the museums in 1980. And now Leighton is now revered again and shown in museums around the world. The Museo de Arte de Ponce has one of the most important collections of Victorian art outside of the United Kingdom. And Louis A. Ferre, the museum's visionary founder, amassed, it's extraordinary and very personal collection of Victorian and pre-Raphaelite art between 1959 and 1974 that has really put Puerto Rico on the map for those interested in this subject. At the time, these works were out of fashion, but Ferre's strategy was to buy quality work regardless of their popularity in the market, and trust his eye and intuition, like he had done in so many things in his life. Because of that, today the Museo de Arte Ponce is internationally recognized as an art museum with an outstanding collection of Victorian paintings and a notable collection of Baroque paintings and extensive collections of Puerto Rican art from the 18th century to the 21st century. For more than 6 decades, the museum has excelled really in areas of research, conservation, and education, connecting the community and its visitors with the arts. And now when the museum is closed, and this collaboration coordinated by Cheryl Hartup, the director of the museum, and Alison Hokinson, associate curator of the European paintings at the Met, is so important. Flaming June technical examination will be conducted by the Met. It's happening by staff member Charlotte Hale, conservator of paintings, Sylvia A. Centeno, research scientist, and Evan Reed, technical documentation manager, with the support of Lydia Aravena, chief curator of the Museo de Arte de Ponce. This collection will be accompanied by an academic study program in the Met. Watch the 2 documentaries videos in the description for more on this subject and my references for this article. Flaming June is the masterpiece of Frederic Leighton, one of the most eminent artists of the Victorian era. It was painted within months of his death and is a distillation of his lifelong preoccupation with formal beauty. Currently on generous loan to the Met in New York from the Museo de Arte de Ponce, a museum founded some 66 years ago with many goals, including to bring European art to the Caribbean. The Ponce Museum holds one of the most important collections of Victorian painting outside the British Isles. Flaming June is the highlight of the collection. It was purchased by the museum's founder, Louis Ferre, from a London gallery in 1963 at a time when Victorian art had fallen out of fashion. Frederic Leighton produced a large body of work, paintings, drawings, and sculpture, and served as a longtime president of the Royal Academy. He often took a subject matter from classical and Renaissance sources. We see him here in the self-portrait against the backdrop of the Parthenon frieze, wearing the medal of the President of the Academy. In Flaming June, An idealized figure appears within an imaginary classical setting, wearing a semi-transparent gown. Although lost in a dream, her body is charged with energy. The composition keeps her eyes moving around the figure, from the top of her head, stepping down through the angles of the elbow and the knees, and then up again through her curved back to the head. The pose, in fact, looks back to Michelangelo's famous tomb sculpture of Night, made for the Medici Chapel in Florence. In both, the figure is asleep, her head bowed down, and the legs are sharply bent, with the knee jutting up and the thigh elongated. Variations of this pose appear in other works that Leighton painted at the time. In creating Flaming June, he posed a nude model in his studio, trying out different positions that matched his mental image. Here the model's arms is extended behind her, and now it is brought back in around the figure, in on herself, in a more compact shape. Leighton abstracted the body as he went along in search of the most expressive form. Note the elongation and the length of the right leg. Once satisfied with the pose, he then drew the figure in sheer drapery that both reveals and conceals the body and adds movement through the fluttering folds. In his final drawing for the painting, he brought the figure and the setting together with the square format he had chosen for his canvas, a perfect foil to the circular figure. In this tiny oil sketch, Leighton made another critical step, introducing the brilliant orange of her dress, one of the most striking features of the work, set off by the darker tones of the drapery strewn over the bench. Color brings into focus other parts of the composition. A bouquet of oleanders on the ledge just above her, and a glimpse of shining sea, as well as the scalloped edge of an awning, which is replaced by a straight edge in the final painting. A master of form, color, and design, Leighton brings all of the elements of his art together in this enduring, sensual image, the purest expression of his aesthetic ideals. This photograph shows the work after its completion in Leighton's London studio, now a museum. The work is shown adjacent to some of the preparatory drawings and surrounded by other paintings of single female figures painted around the same time, including the famous Lacrimée. Frederic Leighton's most iconic painting, Flaming June, is a testament to the aesthetic and philosophical interest of an artist with investments in both academic classicism and the avant-garde. His refined technique, traditional process, intellectual subject matter set him apart from many of his contemporaries, and yet his commitment to the ideal of art for art's sake and pursuit of beauty as the true value in art align him with some of the most progressive artists of the period. Episode 6 started out to be just a couple of announcements about my art exhibit entry and the Flaming June masterpiece on loan to the Met. But there's more to the story. That is why I was not able to quickly post on the weekend, so please forgive me. But I felt I needed to finish the research and give you a more accurate understanding of what's going on with the Museo de Arte de Ponce. Besides this recent collaboration with the Met, the Museo de Arte de Ponce formed an historic alliance with the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico, which is in San Juan, a younger museum. In February 2020, the two preeminent art museums signed an agreement formalizing an historic alliance that will last for 2 years. Here are the principles of both museums. It's like a museum within a museum, using several galleries at the San Juan building to showcase its collection due to the closure of the galleries of the Museo de Arte de Ponce because of the reconstruction work at the Edward Durrell Stone building after the damages caused by the major earthquake in 2020. More recently, the Museo de Arte de Ponce sent its first show of their Puerto Rican collection to Chicago, titled Nostalgia for My Island, Puerto Rican Paintings from 1786 to 1962. It is the first show from the Puerto Rican Museum to travel outside the island, and many of its 21 works have never been seen in the United States. It's on exhibit at the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture in the Humboldt Park Museum, Chicago. The collection is organized by the Museo de Arte de Ponce's curator, Iraida Rodriguez-Negron. Artistic works like these paintings on loan from the Museo de Arte de Ponce remind us that the Puerto Rican culture remains strong, even in times of adversity, Museum CEO Billy Ocasio said in the news release. We have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring this exhibit to Chicago, to bring our communities together in a meaningful way that celebrates Puerto Ricans' important contributions to art and provides opportunities to learn more about Puerto Rico's vibrant culture. More on that exhibit in another episode. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Two news features. I'm very excited about my painting getting accepted. I'm very excited about this collaboration with Puerto Rico's fabulous collection, and finding out finally why this Flaming June is such a revered and beloved Puerto Rico. I mean, there's these souvenirs and prints with the Flaming June, with the flag. I mean, people in Puerto Rico just love the Flaming June, and now I know more, and so do you. So thank you for tuning in and learning something with me today about art.